Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the FIDE Grand Prix. The Grand Prix is a series of 3 tournaments that ultimately will determine which 2 people will qualify as the 7th and 8th, aka the final 2 participants of the Candidates Tournament that is going to be held later in 2022. The winner of the Candidates Tournament will obviously go challenge Magnus Carlsen for the World Championship once again. There are 6 out of 8 people already confirmed to be playing in the Candidates, so the Grand Prix is a series where players can compete and ultimately triumph. The Grand Prix this year has a different format. There are 4 groups, and each of those 4 groups has 4 players in them. They all play against each other in a double round-robin format. That means that a person will play 6 games, and the winner of the group qualifies to a 4-player knockout. So out of each one emerges 1 person. So today we have day number 1, and I'm going to take you through the games. Obviously, we have the group right here. A, B, C, and D. Now, I'm happy to do it any which way. I'm happy to just cover group by group, so I'm mixing draws and wins and everything, or, you know, we'll do it the way we're going to do it today. So I will be covering every game, at least today. We will see if I'm going to do the same in future recaps. Anyway, you guys tell me. So, Magnus is on the thumbnail because he awaits the winners, obviously, and Hikaru's on the thumbnail because this is his first classical game in like 900 days. So everybody's excited to see how it's going to go. We're in Group A. Etienne Bacro from France representing, and Hikaru plays a Berlin. So kind of funny that we're playing it in Berlin, and he plays a Berlin himself. Obviously, if you get a Rui Lopez, you know, you wanna find a solid equalizing weapon, but of course, draw with black, win with white is definitely a fair strategy. Yeah, I saw like the Chess24 Twitter was making fun of Hikaru for playing the Berlin. Okay, I mean, what do you want the guy to do? Come and play the Sicilian? I don't know. But anyway, people were complaining about this. So castles, obviously after castles knight e4, the main line is d4, leading to the Berlin endgame. Bacro plays rook e1, and the structure that we get here is just, I mean, it's just very symmetrical. So you can take on e5, you can also just play knight f5 right away. The players end up just getting a completely symmetrical pawn structure, and basically the argument is that black's pieces just are a little clumsy. It's difficult for black to finish development. So in this position, white's structural integrity over here is very nice with c3. Bacro chooses to play a sideline, which is knight c3. And I suppose he was anticipating Hikaru playing knight h4 here, which he's done many times. And actually, Hikaru hypothesized after the game that Bacro had looked at his chess.com games. Hikaru has been playing this variation apparently a lot, even online. Takes, and this move, knight e2. And in this position, even though c3 is still the move, Bacro plays a move that's never been played before, which is the move knight f4. Maybe it's been played on chess.com or on Lichess or some, you know, online portal, but basically the point is that black has a little bit, like I said already, kind of clumsy development, and you've got to find a way to consolidate. And so Hikaru brings his rooks. He goes back to d8 with the knight, and his idea is that he's going to bring his bishop back and play c6. So now both sides have completely symmetrical structures, and it's just a matter of time until the pieces get traded, and it was just a matter of time. They trade light squared bishops, they trade dark squared bishops, they trade rooks again, and in this position on move 30, which I think is the first eligible moment you're able to offer a draw was offered, and a draw was accepted. So solid return to the game. Obviously, we're going to be seeing a lot of draws, folks. This is top-level chess. The margin of error is extremely small, and Hikaru has been, like that has been the strategy even in the online events. I mean, just be extremely solid with black, and yeah, there you go. Next game I would like to show you is also from Group A. This is, so it's Yesipenko, Grishuk, Hikaru, and Bacro. This one was a Catalan, and when you get Alexander Grishuk at the board, you're going to get a guy who spends a lot of time. And Yesipenko played a b3 Catalan, which just is really rare. You normally just give this pawn away and try to win it back with the queen. And the players got a relatively normal-looking position, but in this position, Grishuk spent 48 minutes. Now, it's classical chess, so you get probably 90 minutes for the entire game, maybe an hour and 40, so maybe 100 minutes. He spent 48 minutes on this move. So I guess he was looking for a way to kind of liberate the pressure here from this light squared bishop. Normally in Catalans, you really don't have just the lone pawn on c4, so Yesipenko deliberately went for a position that was relatively imbalanced. But Grishuk did a very nice job here. He plays bishop d7, and then rather than playing knight c6, he plays bishop a4, attacking the rook. And when we have rook d2, he finds a way to consolidate his position with the knight on c5. So despite spending a lot of time, he actually finds a very nice coordination of his pieces. White also, though, has good pressure on the b file and on this diagonal. It seemed like Yesipenko, when the position transformed here with the trade of the rook and the trade of the knight, was actually figuring some things out. You know, maybe b4, b5 looked kind of okay. And really the only thing that was going wrong for Grishuk was the time management, but anytime Grishuk plays, he's always going to be low on time. At this point, he had about 5 more minutes to make 20 moves. And Yesipenko here made a very big commitment. It seems relatively effortless, just take, right? But black is better now. And in fact, black is dangerously better because black has the luxury of completely giving away this pawn. Now you might say, well, why can't you just play knight takes b5? Rook c8. You can't guard this knight. If you play queen e5, knight d7, you can't guard the knight. You play queen d4, I take. This is guarded. So somehow, this this pawn is untouchable. And Yesipenko coordinates his pieces in a bad way. Queen takes b5 here is what he should play, but maybe he was worried about queen d6, and now queen d4 threatens the rook and the king, and maybe rook b8 is going to win the pawn back. So Yesipenko decides to play queen here, and all of a sudden, black is taking over the initiative. Queen b1 played, and Grishuk is winning. If he plays knight to c3, Grishuk can play knight c3, come back with check, and put the queen on e3, and he's just much better. He's completely swarmed Yesipenko because his pieces are in the corner. Grishuk, though, doesn't find it, and just decides to pick the pawn up on b4, and Yesipenko here sacrifices a second pawn. You'll notice the queen is hanging, but this queen is also hanging. And Yesipenko finds a very nice trick here, where for a very brief moment he's down a pawn, 2 pawns. But because he has back rank threats, black is unable to kind of get moving, and they have to repeat moves because otherwise black is mated. So Grishuk misses a slight chance, but okay, that's life. Next game, Wesley So. So all games in Group A were drawn. Next game I'd like to show you, Wesley So, Lenier Dominguez Perez. This is a Queen's Gambit Accepted, a specialty of Lenier, and he goes for a very aggressive counterattack to e4. Normally you get e5 here, it's the main line, but b5 hanging on to this pawn, and a very, very, very new idea, queen b6 to defend the entire queenside. This has barely been played before 2021, like maybe 3 times. So this is a very new and trendy idea, and it doesn't seem like white has proven any advantage. And this was also seen in Tata Steel, Karyakin Duda, or Duda Karyakin, I think Duda Karyakin. This position, never been played before. So totally new and fresh position. Both sides castle. White has 5 pawns. So does black, but black has this a pawn. But black obviously also has potentially a queen. That can be a target here in the future. So a5. d5. And I mean, visually, the white position looks better. So visually, definitely, like, if you have these pawns and you're going to play d5, I mean, I like black's position on the queen side. I mean, I will say, I do like this, but you're walking directly into this, whereas it's generally better to have more space in the center. It just opens your opportunity. And obviously, that is why Wesley So is trying to kind of make some progress. But this is a very nice idea by Lenier to meet the light squared bishop and get his rook into the game like this. And now it will always be able to transfer over here, and now he has suddenly solved his problems, like very, very quickly. Wesley basically had to not rush with this move d5. That's what he had to do. He had to kind of go for a similar idea as in the game, but if queen d8 here, then he can take, and the knight can go to c5. Well, actually, yes, right away, speaking of which. Right, so that would have been a little bit better, I guess, but because he got a little bit too trigger happy with the d-pawn, we now have a mass simplification. I mean, everything comes off. So like I said, you're going to be seeing this a lot in these games. The margin of error in the opening is very small. And I think the players are aware of that. And basically, if you don't take advantage within 1 or 2 moves out of the opening, you're going to get nothing. But I'm going to show the games anyway. Also in Group D, we have Shirov and Hare Krishna. Now, this one was also a wild affair. It was a Caro-Kann advanced variation with bishop f5, knight f3, and bishop e2. It's a super, super mainline position where black attacks the center right away, and white counterattacks the center right away as well. c5, d5, b2 is just a free pawn, and it's taken, but there have been hundreds of games played here. So if both players remember everything in a theoretical battle, it's going to end in a draw. So let's see if they can both remember. cd4, knight d4, take, bishop b4. Looks like white is winning material. Black is winning material. Black is not winning material because after rook b1, bishop takes c3. Now you might say, well, what about queen c3? Yeah, but then rook b4. So you're not actually winning any material. We have a big trade, b6. Now play here develops in 2 ways. h4 and bishop b5 check. In this position, we have h4. And somehow, despite the black position seemingly being completely undeveloped, black is a pawn up. And at that cost, white is going to have to win the pawn back slowly. And he actually still has not found a way to do that. White is still a pawn down. But white is more active and definitely has some attacking possibilities. That's kind of what happened, bishop takes f7, etc. And the players end up just repeating moves instantly. Now, what's funny is that in this game, up until this very moment, they have been following another game. So 23 moves of this game followed another game between 2 masters like correspondence chess. And that's generally what happens. If both guys remember everything, they're going to repeat moves and make a draw. That's just how chess works. I'm very sorry. The 5th game I would like to show you, we are now moving to Group C. Big battle here. Vincent Keimer, who's the prodigy from Germany. He's actually still in school, though. And you might say, Levy, what does that have to do with anything? A lot of these guys, they stopped going to school. Keimer recently has been talking about studying and taking his final exam. So he's a 16, 70-year-old, 2650 rated GM. And he's playing in the Grand Prix. Like, imagine you can make it to the candidates, but still have to take final exams. Crazy. A lot of these kids, they don't go to school anymore. They are basically professional players. They do get homeschooled, hopefully. Hopefully they, keep up with the curriculum and whatnot. So, yeah. Here we go. D4. D5, and his opponent doesn't need an introduction. We have a Slav defense here, natural, from Dubov, and we have a slow Slav. This is what this is called, the quiet Slav, delaying the development of this bishop. But it does have the option to get very loud with the move knight h4, trying to chase this bishop down. Bishop e4, f3, bishop g6 here, inducing some weaknesses in the white position as a main line. But we have just the immediate capture. And in general, you have long castles and either short castles or no castles by black. Very rarely, black will castle long as well. So now both players develop everything, long castles. And you might say, isn't this hanging? No, because at the end, the queen would have to abandon b7. a5 by Dubov, instigating on the queen side. Queen c2. And now you'll notice that this pawn cannot be taken, right? So a3 and king b1. Now, black is a pawn up. However, all of the future prospects in this position rest with white. So white is going to try to play f3, e4, e5, bishop pair, potentially attack on the h-file. This king will be stuck in the center. So a nice job by Keimer to put himself in a situation where he's going to have good attacking chances. So he does that. He has f3, e4. And Dubov is also trying to create play, and he's playing a lot of natural moves, but the position is extremely risky for black. I mean, what is she doing? The queen's not participating in the game at all. The queen went on vacation. These pieces are trying to fight. And watch as Keimer masterfully just dances around the pawns over there. You can't take me because that's a fork of your king and rook. Rook c8, a b4, bishop b4, knight comes back to kick you out, and I just pick you up here. And I mean, I'm only a pawn down, but your entire queen side is super delicate. Right here, there was an absurd stockfish move that apparently was +2 and change for Keimer, and that's rook d2. Patiently protecting this pawn and just saying, yo, Dubov, you've got nothing. You have absolutely nothing here. You have to bring your queen back, at which point if I take on c4, queen b5, I actually can trade into a winning endgame. This is apparently a +2.5 endgame because these pawns are too strong for white. Just d5, connect 4, knight c3, and attack the weaknesses. And that might be the difference between a like Vincent and like Magnus, for example, because such a massive transformation of the position into a queenless endgame, and just understanding that you're winning is difficult to do, because you haven't attacked anybody, you've undoubled your opponent's pawns, you've actually brought them closer together, but apparently this is a very, very good endgame. It's so good that this is apparently just completely winning for white. Completely winning. The black pawns here are just too delicate and too close to my bishop, knight, and king. And it's winning. You let Stockfish run, it says like over +2. But he's a human, all right? He's not Magnus. And he plays d5. And he tries to attack him in the middle of the board, which also makes plenty of sense, right? King f8 takes, but Dubov gets back in time, and this endgame is a little bit different, because even though there's one loner pawn here, Keimer doesn't have a d-pawn. So Keimer can't make a passed pawn, and now Dubov has to defend the ever so slightly unpleasant endgame. And let me tell you, it is quite unpleasant. Dubov's pawn structure is not fluid. This entire game is Keimer's for the taking. Dubov tries to play g4, kind of simplifying the position. He trades bishop for knight. He trades. You see, he's just making a very deliberate effort to get the game into a territory where he's going to hold an endgame. He gives away a pawn on a4. He takes on f4, bishop g7. But he very correctly here identifies something very clever. So you're about to see the very, very clever move here. This takes some serious understanding of the game of chess. Knight takes b2. An absolutely savage move by Dubov at the highest of levels, sacrificing his knight and playing f5 to now hit the bishop, because when the bishop moves, Dubov knows that rook and bishop versus rook is a draw. Now, some people might win it and some people might lose it, but it's a draw. It's unwinnable. There are multiple ways of defense, like the constant threat of a rook trade, making sure your king doesn't end up on the back row here in a mating net. And if it does, there's even something called second rank defense, which is when you check the enemy king and your rook can't be taken because of stalemate. And the game goes on for 40 moves because it's just sportsmanship. Like, you have to try to win this game. But 40 moves later, Keimer was like, yeah, I'm obviously not going to beat him. And even if I get his king to the back rank, he knows the defense. So this is second rank defense now. So you're just trying to, and you get your king out. Once your king is out, that's it. And there you go. So Dubov avoids kind of an unpleasant position, admittedly maybe for just a move or two, just like we saw in the Wesley So game. And that is yet another draw. Now, we have 3 decisive games. We are going to begin also in Group C. We have this game in Group C, Keimer, Dubov. We also have Aranyan and Gujarati, Vidit Gujarati. We have a Nimso Indian defense. And we have e3 and bishop d3. So very standard stuff here, waiting to develop the knight to e2 or f3. d5, standard. And here, Aranyan plays in a way that has almost never been played, which is just insane, because the Nimso Indian is one of the most theoretically dense openings in all of chess. And he plays cd5. Now, the reason that doesn't get played right away, white usually just finishes development. And then, bishop d2 or whatever. But we have a position where the Nimso bishop doesn't even have to take anymore because the pressure has been alleviated on the center. So Vidit just brings the bishop back, queen c2, c6. We have a position that's been played like 8 times. In the Nimso, that is unheard of. So very interesting decision here by Aranyan. And if you look in the database recently, this position right here has been played, like, remember I told you there's 10 games? Half of them, 5 out of the 10 games, have been played by one man. Young superstar from Russia, and there's a lot of them, young superstar from Russia, Alexander Predko, has played this position a handful of times. I guess he just likes the structure. He likes the game plan. But let me tell you something. In the Nimso Indian, if you're like trying to reinvent the wheel, if you're playing 5 out of the 10 things completely on your own, you know why? Because probably it's okay for black. That's just the truth. Otherwise, people would have discovered it already. You can go for completely equal positions or positions that the engine considers slightly better for black. But Vidit doesn't know that. Vidit doesn't know that it's minus 0.7. Stockfish does and will outplay you and make you look like a fool. A human doesn't know that. So Aranyan moves his king to h1. This is very absurd stuff, but the idea could be in the future to create an attack. That's the point. The king goes to h1. I mean, what is this, right? Like, to the untrained eye, it looks absurd. So Vidit plays c5, playing principled on that side of the board. G6 to prevent anything over here. And Aragnan plays queen d1 to avoid his bishop getting trapped, obviously. Now, bishop goes back to b7. He's like, I'm actually good. I don't want to trade with you. Knight f4. Knight d7 and f3. At this point, Stockfish hates the white position. Like, it's already saying it's -1 for black. How? We've traded one pawn. Also, Stockfish is known to actually have mammoth evaluations one way or the other. So rook c8 is the recommended variation, and play will go on from here. If you actually, my Stockfish already, if you let it run here, wants white to just come back. Like, white just played that move, knight f4. So it's really fascinating to what degree computers can just absolutely tear apart human ideas in chess. Because this is just a game. I mean, Vidit plays knight f8, human-looking move. Maybe he wants to go to e6 in the future, right? And Aragnan plays b4. Now here, to me, I don't know why my nose is so runny. Like, give me a second. I don't know why, it like never happens when I make recaps. Jeez. It's absurd. I don't want to sit here and just, do the Russian thing. That's what Russians do. And then they wipe it with their hand or something. Ugh. Anyway, b4, c4 looks very human. Right? I like c4. And then if the bishop comes back, I like a6, b5. Something like this, knight e6. That's just how I would play the position. But I'm sitting here analyzing the game. I'm not playing in the Grand Prix. Instead, Vidit does this, and takes the knight. He takes the knight because the truth is, in a position of 6, 7, 8 pawns, it's more closed than it is open, and the bishops just aren't that powerful. But also, he likes knight h5. And now he's going to take over the initiative. Again, see, oh my god, I don't know. Maybe I need a hot tea. Bishop e5, f6. He's like, yo, get out of here. Aragnan's like, okay, takes. Now, I like Vidit's position a lot. Seems like he's definitely equalized. Queen c7, knight e2. Look at this move. What a savage move, just entering the territory. The rook's like, what's up? Anybody want to fight? I'm just asking. Do any of you want to fight? Aragnan's like, nah, I'm good. Queen a2, maybe pressure this, maybe queen d2. I got backup now. Queen d6, rook c1. But the thing is that now, this is the kind of position right here where 2700s are made of. Like, if you're a low 2700, mid 2700, former 2835 rated player, Aragnan's highest rating ever is 2835. Do you know that Levan Aragnan holds a top 4, top 5 highest chess rating of all time? Did you know that? That's nuts, right? So, at any moment, that brilliance can flare up, and there can be opportunity. So, rook c1 takes control of the file, bishop activates on b5, right? Rook goes to c8, we have a trade. Now, queen f4. I told you the best players know when to transform the game. Remember that Chimera example? So now we have a queen trade. Aragnan's taken over this game. So these pieces were kind of passive, and in that little lull there of 4 to 5 moves, the right activation, the right piece trades were made by Aragnan. Now Vidit's got to defend an unpleasant position. But okay, king g1, now we bring the king, now we go to h1, we hit the weakness over here. Okay, Vidit defends it by playing actively, but that weakens this. Now Aragnan understands that this transformation is also nice for him. He has a bit more space here. These 3 pawns play into these 3 pawns in a good way. Black now has to go f5. This move apparently is the way to try to hold back the white position. g4 looks very annoying. Takes, rook h7 check, king f6, and trying to play an endgame that looks like this, where you got to defend against this pawn, right? You got to defend so this pawn doesn't die. And it looks like white can try to maybe get to it, but let's say something like a5. I'm just following the kind of the entire length of the position. You get a position that looks like this. Apparently, this is a draw. How many moves did we just play? Like 12? 24? Like 12 each? So 24? The computer wants to argue that this position is a draw. It's very difficult to beeline into a position, and mine might not even be running at a high enough depth, okay? Like, but you still have to play this forever. Nobody in their right mind does that. Nobody in their right mind just goes for a position with their pawn down. Here's the problem, though. In a moment, you are about to be forced into a position where you're a pawn down, so you have to choose how to go about it. It could be that move by Vidit a while ago, h5, looked like the only option, right? You don't want to play a really passive position with a knight on f8. Then white would have slowly expanded. So you go for a position where you're going to lose a pawn, but you have to do it in the right way. He decides to do it like this. Now, how does white win? So you can't take my pawn because you can't let my rook activate. That's the thing about rooks and open files, right? So FIDE understands that and now just sits like this. The question is, what does white trade in order to win this game? What does white need to do in order to win this game? Right? Does white trade rooks? Does white trade bishops? Does white trade rook and bishop? Let me show you. White trades pawns, infiltrates, and that's it. This is the key pawn break. That is the one advantage in this position that you have. And when this trade happens, all you do is trade pawns. Don't rush with a rook trade. Don't rush with a bishop trade. Just keep pieces on the board. FIDE here goes for a sacrifice and a crazy rook situation. It's stalemate if you take it, but we have this, check, here, here, and obviously this was the idea. And this is very different than the other rook and bishop versus rook. This is an endgame where one man's pawns are completely protected and will stay on the board for a while, and FIDE resigns, and Naranjan gets a win. That's a big win for him in Group C. So he is the early leader. And that takes me to Group B, as both matchups in Group B were decisive. Here we have Vladimir Fedoseev and Grigory Aparin, so we have two Russian GMs. And we have a Catalan. So, I mean, this is as top level as it gets. The Catalan is super trendy right now, and Magnus is playing it a lot. We're going to be seeing it a lot in 2022. DC4. Queen C2 here, the main line, trying to win this back. A6, the main line against that. But Aparin plays B5. Now, B5 has been played quite a bit. First game of the world, first Catalan that we saw in the World Championship, I believe, was a B5. A4. And here, black normally plays B4. So black normally will play the move B4 and plant against this knight over here. But instead, Aparin plays bishop B7, which has been played, and Stockfish does approve of this move. The point is that after A takes B5, black plays A6, and now that tactically defends this. So queen C4, AB5 wins for black, actually, because the queen is hit and the rook is hit. Oops. So that's the point. Knight C3 takes. Now we have a trade. Knight B5. Bishop D5. So this is the position that black hopes for with the doubled C-pawns. It basically says, I'm happy. Good luck trying to beat me in this position. And in this position, Rook D1 is played. Now, this has been seen once, actually, in January 2022 in some random tournament in Europe between a guy who beat me, Kirk Gazarian. Beat me not with Rook D1, but the guy beat me in a tournament. Some of you might remember that recap. He played Rook D1, actually. Rook D1 is not, I don't believe it's the top Stockfish move, but they all kind of, bishop F4, bishop G5, Rook D1. So, yeah, maybe Fedoseev has a coach who's a 2300 rated 17-year-old, or he just made it up over the board. So, black now has a moment where black has to equalize. That is the goal in the Catalan. There's a moment where white just sits back and goes, okay, try to equalize. And black goes, okay, I'm going to do my best. C5 takes queen A5. Black now plays knight FD4. Bishop C5, trades, and in a moment, we're going to have another trade. B into C4, bishop takes D4, takes, queen B1. Okay, so the transformation that has occurred leaves us with a knight and bishop versus two knight position, and the pawn structure is obviously different. Now, right around here, black had to find the move bishop F8. Just pausing, not trading bishop for knight, and taking on C4 in a moment without that exchange. Now, bishop F8 is an absurd move. Bishop F8 is kind of setting up the game, the board for the next game. But we do have a situation. When have you ever seen a game where 20 moves in, a bishop and a knight just haven't moved at all? They haven't moved off their home square, right? Kind of rare. They will move in a moment, I promise. There you go. So, white is going to win this game in two ways. White is going to win this game by activating all four pieces in such a way that this king is under attack. Like these knights, these knights, will not be able to repel the white forces. That is one way. The other way is white is just going to win the d5 pawn. It's an isolated pawn. If this pawn was over here, much bigger chance of a draw. How is black going to win this game? Black won't. I'm just going to spoil this right now, unless white does something extremely stupid. This is a game that black is still defending. Why? Because it's an effing Catalan, okay? At this level, the Catalan is toxic poison. No one loses when they play the Catalan with white. They just don't. They just don't. You just can't lose in the Catalan. So Biden is actually trying to create some really aggressive counterplay here against Fedoseev, and he puts the pawn on h3. This is so committal, because now you have two pawns that are potentially extremely delicate, and Fedoseev just begins, look at this consolidation process. I mean, this opening is just a nightmare to deal with because black can get aggressive, but now what? How is black ever going to do anything? I got news for you. Black's not. Look at what black is doing. Black is doing nothing. And you think white is doing nothing. White is actually doing something. White is finding a way to optimally consolidate and at some point just win some material. So he's looking for a queen trade. Black says no to a queen trade. Now the queen infiltrates, right? Knight back to f8. Rook c2, all right, preparing something, moving the knight, right? So this can, queen takes d5. Why did black do that? Why did black move the knight? Find a move for black. Okay, easy, knight to d7. Knight to d7, I take with my knight. That's why I moved away, right? So the white pieces outdanced the black pieces, and this pawn got way too far, and that pawn might not get captured, but I told you, white is going to win this game in two ways. An attack on the king and winning the pawn on d5. White won the pawn on d5. Now that white is completely winning, white is going to go for an attack on the king as well, or win this pawn. Rook a1, rook a7, knight f5. Black resigns because the defense of the king is simply impossible. Great game by Fedoseev. Just simply fantastic game by Fedoseev. However, Biden made it a little bit easy at the moment where he had to just sit back and defend. This h-pawn advance was a little bit too much. I'm not criticizing Biden. I mean, I would have lost this game like 25 moves ago. But right here was the moment when the position was the most annoying. And that's the problem with the Catalan. And sometimes in the Catalan, yeah, you can march your pawn the entire length of the board. And if Biden had played h into g3, for example, this still wouldn't have helped. In fact, white would have used the h-file against black. So there's just no winning with this h-pawn attack. So Fedoseev got a really, really nice position, played it perfectly against his opponent's aggression. Great positional win. He gets a big win. And that takes me to the final game of the recap, which is Radoslav Wojtaszek versus Richard Rapport. Now, Rapport is coming off of Tata Steel, coming off another tournament. He gained some rating. He's now I think he's top 10 in the world. And Wojtaszek is a last-minute replacement for either Andrejkin or Ding Liren. So you're going to laugh, because actually in this game, we have a bit of a weird opening, but you're going to recognize the structure. It's a Catalan-esque position, right? D into c4, queen c2. It's as if the player started with d4, d5, or knight f6, whatever, it doesn't matter. Here, g3, dc4, bishop g2, bishop b4, bishop d2, a5, queen c2. Now watch, I'm going to click back on the main game. Nothing changed. It's because I clicked back on the main game. Nothing changed. So black is in a mainline position right now. dc4, bishop b4, a5. c5. Black trying to attack the center of white, right? a3, takes. And on move 10, actually black is a pawn up, if you count the pawns. But it's the Catalan. So Rapport is going to have to either hang on to this pawn in a meaningful way, or he's going to have to give it up but not suffer too much. Because the thing is, if white wins the pawns back in the Catalan and tortures you, that's a terrible, terrible situation. We just saw that happen, right? Rook a6. Rook a6 stops anything on the 6th rank, and just like in the Lenier game, Lenier Dominguez, maybe b5, maybe support of the 6th rank, right? We just saw that. Rook fd1, and Rapport gets aggressive with the move b5. He's trying to solve his problems right now. Wojtaszek plays knight e5. We have bishop b7, now we have takes, and queen takes d4. And black here plays queen a8. That's the other idea of moving the rook up. Queen flies out of there and starts to counteract this bishop over here. Now, if you just look at the position, you say, oh, I actually kind of like this for black. Black seems to have activated the entire queen side. Doesn't always happen in the Catalan. If this knight moves, there's going to be a trade of bishops, which is unpleasant, right? Rook c1. Remember what I just said? If the knight moves, there's going to be a trade of bishops. Oh, if you take on f3, I'm going to take. Now I have this way. Uh-oh, bishop f1. Right here, maybe Rapport had to be more precise. He had to play maybe bishop d5. And the point is that here, if white plays bishop back to f1, bishop b3. It's just unpleasant to deal with this rook. For example, you play rook d3, counteracting the bishop. I come back. Maybe we repeat moves. If you go to e1, like, what even is this? I mean, this seems like a win for black, right? If we're going to be debating, maybe rook d8 or something. But report plays h6, which is just kind of a little bit of a pass-back move. But after bishop f1, and now bishop d5, knight e5, and Wojtaszek begins the same thing we just saw in the Fedoseev game. He's going to play e4 at some point. That structure, h2, g3, f3, e4, king on f2. I mean, I am willing to bet you king f2 and e4 happen, just like in the Fedoseev game, right? So now these pawns, despite liberating the queen side, which is just what I said, they might actually be a liability for black. Wojtaszek plays queen into c7, just like Fedoseev, trying to trade queens at the right moment. Bishop c4 is a nice idea, trying to activate on the b file at the cost of a pawn, but e4. Wojtaszek's like, I don't need your bishop. Trade it with me. Rook b6, rook d2. Trade bishops with me. Trade bishops with me. Okay, I've waited long enough. I'm going to take my pawn. Now this is defended. Wojtaszek is just pawn up. And there's king f2. Everything came true. This knight has no way into the game. I don't know how he's going to try to activate it. He tries to activate on the h file, right? He plays rook h8. When is this knight going to move? This knight hasn't moved since move 4. What is it doing? What is it getting paid to do? All the other soldiers are participating in the game. Will that knight ever move, for the love of God? Okay, thank you. But it's still rook knight 5 versus rook knight 4. King e2, rook c2. Now, how do you win an endgame like this? Okay, combination of a couple of things. Making constant progress against the king and the knight, like rook c7, e5, and targeting the weaknesses without sacrificing your own. Constant progress without creating weaknesses, right? Targeting your opponent's weaknesses. Okay, rook b4. Constant progress. Is a knight endgame winning for white? We're about to find out. Knight c4, knight d3, protecting. Now the king marches in, right? Constant progress without creating weaknesses. Progress without weaknesses. Progress, bringing the king up. Now a pawn break. Now, if fe5, knight e5, knight b2, you have to calculate your winning here. You are. f4. This knight is stuck in a box. The activity of your knight dominates g5, and white wins. White just marches the pawn all the way through. So report doesn't do that, but it doesn't matter, because there goes the e-pawn. And if you count toward the very, very end, yes, the scary pawn of black versus the scary pawn of white, one is far scarier. And the one that's far scarier, queens, and the game is over. The game is over because the black king is stuck. It can't make any progress because it would walk directly into a fork. Absolutely brutal paralysis in the final position. And Wojtaszek, who was the last-minute replacement, and by many it was said, like, who the heck is this guy? He's obvious. Why is he here? Why didn't they get someone else? He just beat report. He says, shut your dumb ass up. I don't think he actually said that, but it would have been super gangster if he did. Also, I don't know who he's saying that to, but Wojtaszek from Poland, stand up. And he beats report. Absolutely insane. So 2 decisive games in Group B. Hopefully they continue the fireworks. Fedoseev and Aparin, as well as report. And we're definitely going to see some more decisive games because report has to win. I mean, he's got to make a comeback. So link is in the description for standings and all that. And I will see you for the second day. Get out of here.